Well, good evening. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming out. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jay Filer. I've been a part of this group for a good number of years, and it has continued to be just one of the funnest and most valuable things that I have done as a real estate investor, as a business owner, to just gather, network with other people, learn and grow in many different ways. And back when this group started, we used to have 20, 30, maybe 40 people, and I kind of was able to, we kind of knew everybody in the group, and that's not the case anymore. I know I've met and chatted with a lot of you guys, but I don't get to connect with everyone anymore. But yeah, it's just a lot of fun. Main purpose for these meetings is just simply providing education for the community, connecting with other investors, and networking. Yeah, it's just something that has been really, really valuable for myself, continues to be valuable, and I love to be a part of providing that for you guys. These 5 individuals and or businesses basically paid the cost to rent this room for the entire year, and doing some extra stuff like the Ula Bowls last month. We paid a little extra for that. You guys didn't know that, but we did. So Benio Ash, he's a friend of mine, local realtor. Benio's not here tonight. Chris Good is here. We're going to hear from him a little bit later. Chris works with Benio. Nate Rittenhouse from Lancaster Federal Credit Union. Nate was here last month, talked a little bit about what they do. Jeff Moeller. Jeff is in the room somewhere. Does private lending, is a personally an investor, and just a really good resource as even an advisor. I don't know if he calls himself that, but that's what he's been to many of us. Joe Liofsky, Compass Property Management. Joe's been a part of this group from day one. He's the one that started the group. And Dave Wolf, Principal Mortgage Group. And Dave is going to share with us a little bit tonight about why he's a sponsor, what he does, what he might have to offer. So you can come on up and share for a few minutes on that.
All right. Yeah, thanks for having me. Since I don't know if he said, but tonight we're going to talk about insurance. So, as a little icebreaker here, I added up all the amounts of insurance that I pay on a yearly basis. So whoever guesses close to the total amount of insurance I pay in a year. Now you don't even know how many properties I have or anything, so you're going to have to guess. But you get a free mug. So. Write the number down. How much insurance do you think I pay in a year for my property? So this is just property insurance. Write a number down, or I'll trust you. Think about it. I'm going to give you a little more time. Put it in your phone. If you don't get a chance at the free mug. You guys ready?
Yep.
All right. The total is $60,400.
No.
That's
52.
57.
57. Anybody closer?
60.
60?
Sweet.
That's going to do it. Can you catch? All right, pass this back.
How many properties for 60,000?
60,000. It's about 115 doors. So about 90, mostly singles. So maybe 95 properties. But okay, so I'm a sponsor here, so I'm gonna just talk a little bit here, and then it won't be much. But Principal, I'm gonna tell you about 1 or 2 of my companies that I run. Principal Mortgage Group, we do regular mortgages. It's really hard to get these mortgages right now, and it's really painful, the amount of paperwork. So I'm gonna skip over that, but the rates keep climbing every day. I mean, I think we're at 6, 8, 7% here quickly with points. So it's they keep climbing. Not the funnest industry to be in right now, but so we also run a private money company where it's hard money. So I'll leave my cards up here if anybody needs hard private money or hard money. Basically, if you find a deal and you need cash quick, or you want to follow the we talked about before on the Burr method, we do a lot of that. The other company we do is we do have real estate. Real estate, I'm going to just give you a random thought tied to real estate. And Chris is going to talk about the market here, but I think real estate is due for a huge change. Consumers are finding properties before anybody else. This is a consumer-driven, if you think about it, this real estate is very interesting because consumers are finding the properties first. And that has so many effects that are going to come into play in the next 10 years. So if you ever want to chat about that. But, if you think about, I would say 90% of consumers find the properties themselves. Maybe this crowd is not part of that 90%, but a lot of consumers are finding properties before anybody else. So it's a really interesting market in the real estate world. But hey, I'll leave my cards, and if anybody ever wants to chat about anything tied to residential real estate. But I'm going to hand this over to probably Chris.
I'll take it first.
Yep. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jake. I was hoping you would say there was a hula bowl left here, and I was going to claim that one. Do you have a clicker?
I do, yep. I think I put them in the right order for you. If you don't, if they're not, just
It doesn't
put
really
it
matter
in the next
which
one.
order. All right, good evening, everybody. So I updated my slide count from last meeting from 1 to 2, so double my slide count there.
That's without this one. You got two more.
Oh yeah, so this is number 3.
The other one. There you go.
All right, so I'm going to cover a little bit, again, of what I did last time. I know I threw a lot at you and probably forgot most of it, so we'll cover a little bit of that, and then we'll I'm going to try to give you an idea of where the market's trending today. There we go. So January 23, there was 373 units listed. The average days on market was 25. The monthly supply of inventory was 1.1. Again, a healthy market is somewhere between 4 and 6 months, so we're pretty short of that still. The end of month inventory at the end of January was 439 properties. Again, this is single families in Lancaster County, and the average sold price of January was $326,685. So then we jump back a year. Actually, I'm sorry. This is where the market's trending. I'm looking at the wrong slide here. So in December of 22, the units listed were 256. The days on market were a little shorter, 18, so about a week. Shorter days on market for December. Monthly supply of inventory right around the 1.1 range. End of month inventory 424, and the average sold price was a little higher, $329.9. And then back 1 month further, which would be November, the units listed were higher than the following 2 months. So we're at 388. Days on market 18, same as December. The monthly supply of inventory, a little less than December and January. End of month inventory was 487, and the average sold price was $330,631. Now we'll get into the slide I thought I was on when I started talking. So we already covered January. Units listed 373, days on market 25, and supply of inventory, I already covered that. So we'll jump back a year. The units listed in January of 22, it was 364. Days on market were a little less, average of 20 days on market. The monthly supply of inventory was about half what it is now, so approximately half a month of inventory. End of month inventory was at 278, so not quite, a little more than half of what we have this year as far as inventory goes, but interest rates were also a lot lower then. And the average sold price was $310,372. And then I thought it'd be interesting just to jump back 5 years before most of this craziness started. The market was, I would say, pretty strong at that point as well, but not quite as insane as the years that followed. The units listed in January of 2018 was 489. The average days on market was 57, still less than the 2 to 4 month healthy market range. Monthly supply of inventory, 1.6. End of month inventory, you can see quite a bit higher, 767 properties. And the average sold price was $205,235. That there's different obviously it depends, what class of property is being sold, so that fluctuates the average sold price quite a bit per month. But I think it's safe to say, that's pretty healthy appreciation we've seen from January of 18 to January 22. So anyway, that's stuff I find interesting. Would love to get some of your guys' feedback, see what you want to hear. I don't want to stand up here and bore you every meeting, but we're looking to bring some value, so let me know what you guys want to hear.
Thank you, Chris. I'll pick my clicker if you're done with it. I think for most of us, the actual numbers aren't as much of as what we're interested in as the way things are trending, and that's pretty amazing. If we look back to 5 years ago, the number of units listed was more, but not a lot more. But that number going from 205 to 326, 205 to 326 in 5 years is a pretty big deal. You got a question?
I just wondered if there is a measure to know asking price versus sold price.
There is. Yeah, I'll have to.
I would love to know that.
Yeah.
Maybe we think about that for next month.
Minutia.
Thank you.
It's a good thought. Okay, anybody have an off-market deal or something that you want to share? It's a run to the front thing if you do. And if you don't, we're going to keep right on cruising. Okay. We'll probably try to continue doing that. If somebody has an off-market deal or something, you can also feel free to bring flyers or something. It can be a great way to get the word out about properties. Okay, so we're going to dive into the topic of insurance. And I don't think we've ever covered this topic before as a main topic for an evening, and probably mostly because it's actually a pretty boring topic. I don't know if that's what everybody in the room thinks, but I think it's a pretty boring topic. But it's also a pretty important topic, so I'm hoping we put something together tonight that'll be not only educational, but probably also entertaining at times. You're going to hear from Ryan Dalbert, an insurance agent. He's going to share with us briefly kind of insurance 101, and then there's going to be 6 or 7 of us sharing some insurance stories, real life examples, and hopefully you'll come away from here with at least 1 or 2 things where you're saying, like, I never thought of that. So that's the goal. And quite honestly, insurance is also one of those things, if you're a new investor, you're looking to buy your first property, you really don't need to know much about it. All you need to know is get connected with a good insurance agent, or a couple of them, shop some prices, figure out what you're comfortable with on a deductible, and just get coverage, and don't worry about it. And hopefully you'll go many years before you have a claim like I did, and then when the time comes that you have a claim, you call your insurance agent, which is what I did, and you figure out the process. And it's kind of a pain, but you really don't need to know all that going into buying your first property. So, like I said, just in a minute here, we're going to have Ryan come up and share kind of briefly, but this is one example of the power of a referral. So I have been working with Ryan. I was going to tell you it's like 4 or 5 years. Ryan said when he walked in, he looked back and he said it's been since 2015. So he has written dozens of policies for me. I never met him before tonight, which is always a cool thing. And that came from a referral. I specifically remember I was shopping. I was having trouble getting insurance for a vacant property. Vacant properties are usually harder to insure. I reached out to April Crossley and I said, hey, who do you use for this kind of stuff? And she sent me Ryan's contact. She's like, this is your guy. And since that, I have used him for a lot of properties, and I have referred him to quite a few more people. So that's the power of a referral. So Ryan, you can come on up. He's going to share with us for probably 10, 15 minutes, something like that. kind of on the basics of insurance. Might have time to field a couple of questions at the end if you have something, but the goal here is to kind of get an overview of insurance and different things, and then we're going to go into some real life examples. So please help me welcome Ryan Dauber.
Well, thank you, Jake, for number one inviting me and being just a great partner. So, as Jake said, my name is Ryan Dauber. I own Dauber, Shannon and Associates. We're an independent insurance agency. And Jake kind of just asked me to kind of give everyone just like a one-on-one course on insurance, just certain things you want to maybe keep in mind when you're shopping. Wrong way. So, first thing, as a real estate investor, you want to make sure you're getting the right policy to fit your given risk. So there's a couple different policy forms. The one you're going to probably see most common as a real estate investor is one called a dwelling fire. Dwelling fire covers, of course, a lot more than just fire, but you're typically going to see those for any property that's 1 to 4 units. A business owner's policy, so you'll generally use a business owner's policy. A lot of carriers will do them on 3 units plus. Anything that's 5 units or over has to be on a business owner's policy form. And then also anything that's mixed occupancy, so say it's an apartment above a hair salon. Commercial occupancy with an apartment, that's considered a commercial product. Then also homeowners, obviously a home that you live in would be on a homeowner's policy, but also in the context of being a real estate investor, you'll see those a lot of times for like a secondary home that you might rent out or an Airbnb type property. And then kind of how I met with Jake, vacant renovations policy. So if you're buying something, it's vacant, you plan on putting some money into it, whether you're flipping it or eventually plan on renting it out, that's going to be a vacant renovations or a builder's risk type policy. And then probably one of the most overlooked aspects of insurance that's incredibly important, arguably probably the most important aspect of any insurance policy is your actual settlement terms. So when you go to cash in your check, God forbid something happens, how are you going to get paid? And how's the insurance company going to settle that loss? So I am a huge advocate of replacement cost coverage. So replacement cost coverage, say the building completely burns down, it pays you exactly what it would cost to rebuild that building, exactly like it stands, just brand new. There's no deduction for depreciation or anything like that. It's whatever it costs to rebuild it. Typically with most investment properties, like if it's an older row home, that's probably going to be significantly more than your purchase price. And conversely, with new construction, a lot of times you'll see that, frame stick-built house, vinyl siding, you actually might see that lower than what you paid for the property. Because of course, land value comes in the market. Market value, it's not a factor in your insurance valuation. The next one, I always say kind of avoid like the plague, that's actual cash value. So what that does at time of loss, pays you a depreciated market value of the property. So it doesn't matter if your policy says $200,000 on it. If the house in the market's worth about $100,000, that's where they start, and then they start deducting for depreciation. So they could say, well, the roof's 20 years old, so we're gonna knock off 10 grand for that. You had original plumbing, so another 15 for that. And at the end of the day, you get left with certainly without enough to rebuild, but also not enough to buy something comparable. Where people do get into coverage with actual cash value is if you have a loan on the property. But most lenders won't lend against actual cash value, but if they do, and that property burns down, you might still own the bank for a property that that no longer exists, no longer earning an income, and you can't afford to rebuild. So if you ever see actual cash value, I always say kind of run like a plague, but there's probably definitely a better option. More recently, probably we've seen this a lot more within the last 5-6 years, is a lot of carriers are pushing functional or similar replacement cost coverage. It's kind of a blend of both. So it's replacement cost coverage, but the carrier reserves the right to rebuild your house as long as it's quote unquote functionally similar. So if you had a solid brick house, plaster walls, they can just build frame, drywall, and vinyl siding because as long as it's the same square foot, it's functionally the same. I do not like this either. I never like to give an insurance company freedom to choose how my asset is rebuilt. I kind of equate it like, you're selling your house and then the buyer says, well, at time of closing, I'm going to give you $200,000 or $100,000, but I'll tell you at time of closing. chances are that offer's coming in at 100 grand. So I never want to give a carrier any kind of freedom to choose how your home's going to be rebuilt. You always want to contractually obligate them to perform, and that's what replacement cost coverage gets you. And this slide is kind of more geared towards new investors. Certainly as your portfolio grows, you want to start scaling back on some of the optional coverages that you can add to a policy. However, if you're a new investor, maybe it's your first property and you don't really have a rainy day fund for unexpected repairs, there are some certain endorsements that you can add on to your policy that typically aren't going to be included in your base level policy. That might be beneficial. So the first one, EBD, so just short for equipment breakdown. What that does, it functions like a not garbage home warranty that's insurance backed. It's a regulated product. Basically, if your HVAC system stops working middle of winter, you can utilize equipment breakdown on cover for the repair or replacement. Generally, that endorsement's pretty cheap. It's usually around anywhere from like $20 to $50 depending on the property. So that's definitely one to consider. Water backup, so water comes in the basement the wrong way it should and damages anything in the basement. You can use water backup. Typically that water source backup is going to be excluded on the underlying policy, but you can add water backup. Now if it's dirt floor basement, there's really not much down there, it's probably one you can get away without adding. I don't typically carry it or recommend it, or I don't carry it on my own properties. The only time I really do recommend it strongly is if you have like a finished basement and there's carpeting, drywall down there, or a basement unit, then that's usually a pretty valuable endorsement. Cost of that again depends on the carrier property, but it's another one that's pretty like a nominal cost, anywhere from like $30 to maybe $150 depending on the property. Another one we've seen more people ask about and become a more common endorsement is service line. So your buried service line from wherever it leaves the foundation of your house to where it connects to the public utility, that's not covered. So if that line fails, tree root grows into it, or just 150-year-old cast iron pipe, that if that fails, that wouldn't be covered on a typical policy. So the service line coverage, that will protect that pipe, so the excavation and then repair of that pipe would be covered under your insurance policy. That endorsement, most carriers, it's around the same price. Some carriers don't offer it. It just depends. So that's one we could look into if that's a concern, specifically on maybe like a real old building. But again, take all this with kind of a grain of salt. Certainly if your portfolio is pretty large, you can really afford to self-insure by your premium savings for some of these losses. And then sinkhole coverage too. So some carriers do include it as part of their base policy. There's kind of exceptions to every insurance rule. But depending on where you live, if sinkholes are common in your area, it might be something you want to consider. My personal investment properties are primarily in Allentown, Pennsylvania, a pretty urban area if you're familiar with it. Sinkholes not really a concern. However, my primary residence, I live in Bethlehem Township, which is like widely known as pretty susceptible to sinkholes. As a matter of fact, I have one in my backyard currently. Sinkhole coverage doesn't come into play until it damages part of your home, the home structure itself. So if you own 100 acres, you have a sinkhole in the middle of the back 40, it's not damaging anything. Your insurance company's not going to pay for it. But if that sinkhole happens to be right at the foundation of your house and your house is starting to sink into it, that's another story. That's where that sinkhole endorsement becomes pretty valuable. And then a couple helpful tips that I've come across and that I think are valuable for real estate investors. So I kind of like following the rule of doing one policy for one property. So you don't see it as much anymore, but maybe about like 10 years ago, you used to see a lot of investors like loop multiple properties onto the same policy. So your one policy with maybe 10 locations on it. And primarily is just for admin purposes. It's a little bit easier paying one bill than 10. But I'm never a big believer in that. Firstly, because you're sharing typically a singular liability limit across multiple assets. So you might have a $300,000 liability limit of coverage across 10 different properties. If you have a bad liability loss, you're effectively leaving your properties uninsured for liability for the rest of the year. Also, if you have, say, bad claims year, so say you have those 10 properties, you have 2 claims, the carrier could very easily say, hey, you know what, thanks but no thanks, we're going to non-renew this policy. If that happens, then now you're stuck shopping 10 properties with a cancellation history, which is going to definitely increase rates. And then lastly, kind of your accountant, I'd say will love you. It makes it a lot easier come tax time to figure out what your expenses are versus a blended policy where there might be multiple locations listed. And probably the biggest thing is just use your agent as a resource. We're here, or should be here at least, to answer any questions that you have. If you don't know, do not assume something. If you want to know if something's specifically covered, be sure to ask those questions. If you don't ask, your agent, might not be able to, answer what they don't know. So just make sure you ask as many questions as possible. And if your agent gets annoyed by asking questions, find a new agent. Really should know what you're buying. And insurance really isn't a homogeneous product. A lot of people kind of just look at price and then they don't really look at the actual coverage. And I try to tell everybody price without the context of coverage doesn't really tell you anything. You could have, say, a $200 a year actual cash value policy that's really covered nothing versus a full replacement cost coverage, and maybe it's $350 a year. And if you just stop looking at price, you could be putting yourself in a precarious position if you buy the wrong coverage. So just be sure to ask questions. And then kind of another thing that's kind of very important is make sure you're doing your part as a client. And what do I mean by that? So try to avoid at all costs to put through small dollar claims. I have a client, he has, I think it's like 97, it's right under 100 single family homes outside of Pittsburgh. He had 2 claims within the last 5 years. One was a fire claim, one was a water damage claim for a leaky pipe. Immediately, half of the carriers that we work with, if not more, will not even quote the business. There's certain carriers where their reinsurance guidelines mandate that if a client has X amount of claims, we're not even interested in the business. We don't care if he owns 100 or 1,000 accounts. We're not going to touch it. So insurance is not a replacement for maintenance. So like I always tell our clients, if something minor happens, call me first. God forbid, home burns down. Number one, if it's 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm definitely sleeping, so don't call me. But you can certainly call, the insurance company directly. They will almost always have a 24-hour line. But anything that's minor, call your agent first, specifically if they're an independent agent, they have multiple companies, and talk through it with them to see if it makes sense to use insurance. The easy example, a piece of siding blows off in a storm, it's $1,400 to repair, and your deductible's $1,000. Don't put through an insurance claim to collect $400. All that's going to do is put a claim on your record. It's going to increase your premium for the next 5 years. And then if you go to buy more investment properties and they see that claim, all new business is going to have that same increased cost built into it as well. Over the course of that 5 years that's going to be on your record is going to cost you a lot more than that $400. And the last one is a bit of shameless self-promotion here too. Just make sure you're shopping. If you go to a State Farm or an Allstate, typically you're only going to see a State Farm or an Allstate product, versus if you go to an independent agency, like the one over there at Albert Shannon. We have a lot more carriers that we can offer you, and there's certainly a lot more independent agencies like my own, who can take it to multiple markets and find the best product for that given risk. And I think that's it. So I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, if you want to field a few questions, that would be just fine.
What would you say then, what's the line to where you should file a claim or kind of?
And if you don't mind repeating the questions for the...
Yeah, so he asked what would be kind of the line to when you want to submit a claim or not. So that's a great question. My answer would be it depends on the individual client and their portfolio. Like for instance, if you have one policy and like I was saying earlier, you don't have like a big war chest built up, you might want to file a smaller claim versus you have a rapidly growing portfolio and you're actively buying properties. You probably want to maybe just think about it before it's something minor. Now, like to give like a ball rough, like ballpark number, it's really difficult, just because every client's a little bit different. But the best answer I would say is just talk to your agent and see what they recommend. But if it's like $1,200, you have a $1,000 deductible, and they tell you to submit a claim, you might want to ask somebody else.
Sure. Yeah, thank you.
So, at what point do you figure out if you're there's such a thing as overinsured, correct?
There can be, yes.
So if you feel like your agent came back with a quote that is, you feel pretty confident is lower than what it would cost to replace, how does that work? At what point do they say, this is our number, no matter what you insure higher than that, they wouldn't cover that?
Sure. So his question was, when you're setting insurance limits, I'm going to paraphrase it here a little bit. How do you determine if you're overinsured or underinsured? It depends on the individual property. So when we as insurance agents are running a property, we pull everything that we can from tax records. We'll ask you questions too about the specific property. Give yourselves a virtual tour on Google Maps or other online resources. And then we plug all that data into the carrier systems that spits back a replacement cost. Part of it is experience. Two, we want to make sure that number is pretty accurate. So we, as an agent, we are double checking that. Certainly if you see something that looks amiss, you have 1,000 square foot single family and the replacement cost is coming in at like $400,000. That's something you want to question. Because it's possible that maybe bad data was pulled when they were running that property, that's coming back with an inflated number. The other side of that too is, maybe on the tax records it says your house is 1,000, but you put in a 1,500 square foot addition last year. If we are just looking at tax records to determine the square footage of your house, we're probably going to miss that. Hopefully there's other safeguards, but hypothetically speaking. So that's just something you want to be upfront about to make sure that that number kind of matches. So replacement costs generally, it really depends, but depending on the area, type of property, you should look probably anywhere from like 170 a square up to like maybe 220. Certainly in a higher end house, you'd see that higher, but that's like a rough kind of ballpark, which gets you close enough to be dangerous.
Maybe one more question?
Why does insurance go up if you have a claim? That doesn't sound fair.
Oh, they're paying out. So insurance companies, they're not charities. They are for-profit entities. So when they're looking at their risk modeling and they see that, okay, well, maybe this client submits, a claim every 2 years, we can maybe reasonably make an assumption that they're going to continue to submit that claim. Therefore, we need to charge them a more accurate rate. So it's just property insurance functions no different than auto insurance. If you have 17 DUIs and you get an accident every year, you can expect your rates to be a little bit higher than if you're never had a ticket ever. So that's primarily the reason.
How about a hand for Ryan? Awesome. So now that you got the basics there, we're going to jump into some real life examples and some stories. So I have no idea how this is going to go. We've never really done this type of thing before, where we had this many different people come up and share. I'm going to say if you have questions during this time, feel free to ask questions specific to what someone's explaining. If it starts to get too long, we're going to have to kind of keep moving a little bit. The goal is to have each person that's coming up to share for 5 or 10 minutes, or kind of depends on how it goes. So it's going to be a broad range of stuff. Some of the guys I know what they're going to share about. Some of the guys I have no idea. But we're going to start with Jeff Moore. Jeff, you want to come on up? And Jeff has been in the business for quite a while, has a bunch of rental properties, and just has a very broad perspective on this. So it's all yours, Jeff.
All right. All right, well, I've made a list of a few things. Now, fortunately, I don't have personally any insurance horror stories. I did have some clients years ago that bought a property at a sheriff's sale, and the person didn't leave when they were supposed to, so they tried to do a self-help eviction. They just showed up, changed the locks, and were about ready to leave when the guy showed up and, with a gun and forced them to leave, and then set the house on fire with himself inside it. Fortunately, they had insurance, and it was probably one of their best deals ever because the property was in pretty poor shape, but they got a brand new house, so it worked out for them. Apologies there. But, I wouldn't recommend it when you're on the business end of a gun. I think your life flashes in front of you. I do want to mention, I believe that insurance is an indemnity contract. It only covers things that the insurance company says they're going to cover, subject to their limitations. And so nobody ever reads them, but maybe one time you might want to take a look at it. You might be surprised what they do and don't cover. I did want to mention a few things that maybe you might need insurance for and never thought about and never talked to your agent about it. One is collectibles and precious metals. I know a lot of people here are hard asset. People might have some gold, silver, collectibles in your safe, and might want to mention that to your agent if you have more than 1,000 or two. If you're robbed or you come home and your house is burned down and there's just a puddle of gold on the floor, you might want coverage for that. And there are people that cover that kind of thing. Or if you have crypto, I don't know if there's anybody that covers theft of crypto off of an exchange, but that's something that could be stolen from you. And that is something to at least ask about. And the last thing is, back when I was doing settlements, I oftentimes got church insurance, and most of the local banks accept that. I don't know much about that insurance, whether it covers rentals or not, but you may want to ask those questions. If church insurance does cover rentals, what exactly does it cover? Lost rents, liability for pit bulls that your tenants have, some of those types of things. So, got a little bit of food for thought, but yeah, other than being your tenants burning down your house, that's the most interesting thing I have. So, who's next, Jake?
Yeah. Better hand to Jeff. That's a couple of things that I hadn't thought of there. So next up, Daniel Fisher. Daniel had an interesting pipe freeze, water leak up in the ceiling of a building of a freshly rehabbed property, and made some really nice icicles. Actually, I have no idea if it did or not. Tell us about that.
Yeah, icicles. There was icicles out the window of the second floor from condensation from the inside of the house. Yeah. So this was on day after Christmas. We were having a Christmas party with my family, and I had left my phone at home. I was not going to look at anything, and we get home about 10:30 that night. What did I do? I checked my messages, and there's multiple calls, text messages. Anyway, but my realtor ended up going out, shutting down the water, and there was like 6 inches of water in the basement, and this was found by the buyers. So this was a property we had freshly rehabbed. We were Christmas. We were scheduled to close the 31st, I believe, that next week. And the buyers were they wanted to go see their new house. So they went out there, they walked around, come around the back, there's water running out the back basement patio door. And so they go upstairs, up on the deck, and take, we got videos of water flowing out of the first floor ceiling. I guess you guys all remember the cold snap we had over Christmas. And so my realtor at some point went down there to turn the water off. She didn't know how to get to the main, so she went to the electric meter and just shut it off. Shut everything off. She said it felt like a sauna in there. It was just hot and very damp. So I get this text at 10:30 that night, and I hardly slept. So we get up the next morning. I tell my guys, well, we're going to go down there, check it out at least. And we get down there and poke around a little bit. I didn't want to do too much until I talked to somebody. We did a few things and checked things out. And it's around 8 or a little bit before 8. I called my insurance, and they said, call your insurance carrier. We'll go from there. And so we were all anxious, and this is kind of back to, we're used to going in there and just taking care of things, right? So we started ripping out drywall and insulation, and bathroom was right in there. It was just gutted the thing, and there was quite a bit of damage there. We had a finished basement as well. So finally got to the point where this is way too much, and we're all right. What about just getting somebody else out here to take care of it? And made some phone calls, and they came out. Guess what? That would have been the easiest thing to do, because we had a struggle with the insurance company because they thought that we were just ripping things apart to hide other stuff. It was for a little bit that they thought that. But long story short, we got the adjuster out and got things put back together. And we had a pretty high deductible. We have a $5,000 deductible, and I made sure when we wrote up the policy years ago that it's at replacement cost. And somewhere in there it says if there's a claim over $5,000, it's at cash value, depreciated. So literally I had no replacement cost policy because my deductible was $5,000, my claim was at $20,000. So yeah, things to look out for. But it was an experience for sure. So yeah.
So how much money did you lose?
About $5,000.
Oh, that's it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, no, we waited until next week to settle.
Okay.
So it's another $10,000 in holding costs.
Okay.
Yep. So it was more like $15,000. But yeah, I also wanted to mention I've been working with Ryan for quite some time. I am not sure where the connection was made. It was, yeah. It's good to have you on our team. Thank you very much.
So how long did your settlement get delayed on that?
2 months.
2 months.
2 months.
Yeah, and some frustration and stuff. So about a $20,000 claim. Yeah. Okay, Joe, you're next. Tell us what you got from all your ventures out there as a property manager too.
Oh, I didn't even think of that. With the property management, there's probably a few other, but I had one of my own personal properties maybe 6, 7 years ago. It was an old Victorian house, and somebody decided that, I don't know, trying to take a shortcut on 23 and ended up right on the front porch. There's 2 massive trees. I have no idea how they missed that. They ended up on the front porch. My neighbor at the time, Ron Bressler, has a towing business, so we got him out there with one of his bigger wreckers and a crane. He actually supported the the porch roof, well, the other one pulled the vehicle out, the plywood up against the home and then set the porch down. And I'm thinking, all right, it's not that much damage. You know, there's a vehicle on the porch, you know, replace it. So I didn't bother calling my insurance agent. I just figured, you know, I got the insurance information from the police and, you know, started dealing with them. Had a good professional in the area that was going to do the work, because it's an old house. And the insurance company started, every time there was anything he asked about, they were balking at the price. You know, why is it so much? Why is it this and that? So finally, I called my insurance agent and decided to just kind of wash my hands of it. Well, the bill ended up being over 40 grand because it was an old porch, it was a different style of wood, it was a standing seam roof, it had hidden gutters, and there's no way that if I was dealing with the other insurance company that stuff would have been put back the way that it was. What was that? Functionally sufficient or whatever. You know, they'd have just put a roof on it and shingles and gutters and it'd have been done. But that would have killed the whole cosmetic look of the front of the house. So I guess my lesson would be, yeah, call your agent as soon as possible. So let them know what's going on. Let them handle it, because they know all the ins and outs of what to do and how to have it done. I do have a $5,000 deductible on all my policies because I hate dealing with paperwork. I hate making claims. But in this case, it was definitely the best thing to do is just call my agent, let them deal with it, let them take care of it. So that would be my advice to you guys, the same thing Ryan said. You know, call your agent. There might be something that you didn't even think about or something completely overlooked. Just call them and let them deal with it. That's why you have them. So that's it for me.
All right, thank you, Joe. I got a porch story for you then later as well, but it's a little different than that one. Next up is Darryl Everly, and we've got where's my clicker? Darryl sent me some info to throw up on the slide. I didn't put your social security number and credit card information on there. You can put that.
Hey, talking about insurance, there's a guy out there you want to watch out for. He walked into an insurance agent's office and he asked the guy, said, "You guys handle fire insurance?" And the agent said, "No, we handle flood insurance." Not sure how to start a flood. Anyway, watch out for him. No, in 19 years in over a lot of properties, I've had a total of 4 claims. The one was actually an earlier one, quite a few years ago, was on a row home in Lancaster City. Tenant left for work in the morning. They had a candle burning, one of those little glass candles, like this high. Had it on a knee wall, up on the 3rd floor, a little knee wall that surrounded the steps where you go down to the 2nd floor. Had it sitting on there, and they went to work and forgot it was burning. As you can imagine, it burnt down and it fell down to the 2nd floor, caught some blankets on fire. There's a house fire. I got a phone call. It wasn't a very pleasant phone call to hear about your house is on fire, but long story short, what ended up happening, the adjuster came out, an evaluation, $21,000 worth of damage in that particular case. The fire company actually got there fairly quickly. $21,000 worth of damage. I got a check for that amount. My contractor I was working with fixed it for $12,000, and I went on 2 hunting trips. So anyway, do whatever I can to save these poor little endangered plants. So anyway, another one. There was I guess 3 different times a tenant on some form or another slipped on some stairs or slipped on a sidewalk. I might have been slippy of some form or another. And in each of these cases, I'm grateful for insurance because in each of these cases, the insurance company's attorneys took care of it. I made a 5-minute phone call, and that was the last I heard about it because they dealt with it with the tenant. In one scenario, the tenant claimed a visitor of theirs was leaving the house, and there was like a approximately 10 steps to go down to the sidewalk here again in Lancaster City. But their visitor was leaving their house late at night and was walking down, and their claim was that this person tripped over a concrete flower pot, maybe 2 feet high, that was there kind of to the side of the steps for years. It's been there. And I think maybe had a broken bone in their arm. At any rate, they attempted to make a pretty large claim over this. And one of the pictures that they had sent into this person that supposedly had this damage, one of the pictures that they sent into the insurance agent, their insurance agent, not mine, was of this flower pot on the front porch. Picture taken in daylight, and it didn't take long for the insurance agent to figure out there was a fraud claim here, because the flower pot had been sitting there for years at this certain location. It was well out of the pathway of the stairs, and it was obvious in the picture that the flower pot had been moved over about 1.5 feet because there was a stain on the concrete where it had sitting for years. So they denied that claim. But in each of those cases, someone slipped on the sidewalk or something. In each case, the insurance company's attorneys took care of it. I never heard about it again. So I always have fairly high extra liability coverage. I think it's one of the most economical, cheapest types of insurance. I just put extra on that just in case, and I sleep really good at night. So there was, I think it's probably fair to say when I first started out, I worried about this stuff. I did. How many worried about getting those phone calls from a tenant and a fire or something like that when you started out? I will say this, I think it puts things into perspective as far as worrying about that type of thing. Keep good insurance, but my perspective is this. Anybody worried? My perspective is this. I have survived many, many life's tragedies, 95% of which never happened. So that's my take on insurance. So.
Thank you, Darryl. Very good. Okay, next up we have Eli King. So Eli, come on up and tell us about some of the interesting stuff that you've navigated.
Yeah, well, thanks, Jake. So first off, I don't think a whole lot of us here in the room have any idea how much work Jake puts into getting this meeting together. I find it a really valuable place to get together. So let's all give Jake a hand. So thanks, Jake, for everything you do. I do appreciate it a lot, even if we don't always act like it. So yeah, I have been investing in real estate since 2010. And I do have a couple interesting stories, and this first one here is probably the most interesting one. So after buying real estate for about 6 years, I bought an 8-unit building in Lancaster City, and we started doing work pretty soon right after that. And about 2 months later, we had a couple of unpaying tenants there, which is partly why it got sold. And one of the tenants was getting evicted, so he fell down the stairway while I was getting out of his apartment during an argument with his girlfriend. So he had been drinking pretty heavily and didn't make it down the stairs the way he was intending. So I get a call from my building manager, who actually lived at the building and kind of swept the hallways and did light maintenance, also collected the rent. I was managing the building myself there. So he heard the noise. He went around and asked the tenant if he can, call the ambulance, and he didn't want the ambulance there. He's like, just we'll deal with this. So right after that, the building manager called me to let me know what happened, and also let me know that this tenant made the remark that he intends to sue me because this is all my fault. So I called my insurance company just because that's what you do, and notified them that there's been this incident. So the insurance company had actually been out there about 3 weeks before that as part of their initial building inspection. So this particular insurance company was a bit more hands-on than some insurance companies. They would actually go out and take photos of each property that I bought, as well as do a general overall inspection. They had photos of this hallway in their report, which was very helpful. So in addition, we had also had a city inspection done about a month before that. So we had a lot of things in our favor there, all of which helped our case. So about 6 months later, I get a letter of intent to sue, which totally freaked me out because this guy did break his wrist, and they can take my house and my barn and everything I have, whatever. So it was kind of it was a big concern there for me. So I forwarded the letter to my insurance company. A little bit later, I sell the building, none of which affected our case or the insurance company covering me. So even though I sold the building, didn't own it anymore, they were still covering me as per their requirement. So nothing happens, and so I just kind of assumed that, hey, maybe they got cold feet, decided not to sue or whatever, and life goes on. So then about 2 months before the statute of limitations, which is when they can no longer sue me, 2 months before that expired, which I believe that's 2 or 3 years, whatever it is, 2 months before that, the sheriff stopped by my house and freaked my wife out and delivered this beautiful paperwork. So I notified my insurance company, and they immediately hired the defense attorney, and the process gets started. So it's a really messy process. I hadn't been aware of quite how nasty it is. Like, I was, scum of the earth slumlord that just doesn't care about my tenants and just lets my buildings go to trash and, is just completely negligent. None of which were true. So it was a really messy process. I wouldn't recommend anyone going through it, but in the end, it was about, 15 months later, after a lot of discovery and meetings with the attorney and providing documentation, and the attorney was, there's a big process. There's a lot of paperwork to file, and so at the end of all that, the judge, there was an arbitrator trial, which is not a big courtroom trial, but basically you sit in front of 3 judges and each present your side of what happened. So they really had no case. First, it was probably a water leak from the hallway ceiling, which there was no water line there. So then it turned into probably an oil spill from a trash bag, which the building manager said, well, that can't be because I hauled I had to take care of the trash and there was nothing there. So it was really a case without merit, but they gave it everything they had. It was very interesting in that after the first meeting with my attorney, or with the insurance company's attorney, which really knew what he was doing, he said, he told me it's probably nothing to worry about. He said they hired a law firm from Philadelphia because none of the firms around here would take it. It's a case that attorneys around here, they do a little research and they figure out, this guy's not going to get anywhere, and they didn't take the case. So it was very valuable to have the liability insurance at that point. So even though he didn't win, I didn't have to pay any of the attorney fees. The insurance company covered that. But more importantly, they also knew who to call, and they hired a really sharp defense attorney who handled everything. And he told me what to do and what not to do, and was just, yeah, took a big load off my shoulders. So that was, yeah, I sighed a big sigh of relief when it was all done, and kind of forgot a lot about it until Jake asked me if I could share. So I had to think about some things there. All right. So yeah, some of the key takeaways there, things really in my favor were having a building manager on site, which that's the only building that I bought that I can even remember having that, that kind of a guy there. Most of them are just tenants and they don't have any kind of responsibility. The other thing that was really helpful was having your city inspection. If there's not a list of repairs that are not done, it's much harder to find liability. Yeah, having the insurance company do their inspection 3 weeks prior was very helpful as well. They had found nothing out of place, which was extremely important documentation, to have at the in front of the judges. So they pretty soon seen what was going on and obviously ruled in my favor because of all that. The other thing here, this was a common hallway, and we had 24-hour LED lighting, which had no switch. There was no possible way that that lighting could have been turned off. So he made all these false claims about me being, whatever, and none of it was true. And it was pretty easy to prove with all the documentation that we were able to provide. And then having the sharp defense attorney. I mean, he told me pretty soon where this was going to go and how it was going to turn out. He knew what he was doing. He knew, he did, I found a lot out about opposition research. Like, he got the scoop on this guy. And it really helped him figure out how to best deal with things. So all in all, it was a very uncomfortable experience for me, but in the end, I felt, I really pitied the tenant at the end of it all. I mean, he was just a guy that had never, made much out of his life, and here was his big shot to make a bunch of money, and, it didn't work out that way. So I was okay with that outcome, but did feel sorry for him at the end of everything, because he was just a loser in life based on the choices that he had made. And yeah, so that was that story. Then another one was a dog bite. So I have some properties in Indiana, and those are all professionally managed with a property manager from out there. And so she calls me and says, hey, there's been an incident where one of your tenants has a son that moved in, who's not on the lease, who has a pit bull that also moved in, who's also not on the lease. And I was like, okay, so I guess you're going to take care of that, right? So she says, yeah, there's been this incident, and the dog jumped the fence and bit the neighbor's son who was visiting from Georgia, and they're going to sue me. All right, well, I guess we'll have to take care of that, but in the meantime, please get rid of the dog. So she did that, and several months later, they did file the lawsuit, which we knew was coming, and I rather like, if they're going to do it, to just get it done, right? Because none of this worrying when they're going to get on with it and if it's actually going to happen or not. So I get served the lawsuit, and I read it, and at that point, I'm not going to say it wasn't any concern, but I had been through this before, right? And so I read the lawsuit, and I had to laugh. So what happened was the dog bit the neighbor's son in the foot. That's not funny. I hate pit bulls myself. I don't like them either, for a reason. But the lawsuit said that as the plaintiff tried to flee this vicious dog, the dog attempted to detach the plaintiff's foot from his leg. It might have been true, but he bit is what he did. But you can't, make this graphic just stretch this as far as you can. And they're pretty good at what they do. I have to give them that. So I forward this to my insurance company, who then denies my claim because I have a dog bite exclusion. I didn't read my policy, right? So that was pretty interesting to me. But they did do some things right. So before they denied my claim, they actually hired a defense attorney who was really good at what she did, who agreed to take on the case. And she told me right away that they have no merit. So she felt very confident that we can successfully defend this. So this was, I think, right before COVID, which then turned into COVID. And so this case got dragged out around a year and a half. So about a year and a half and $13,000 later, the judge actually dismissed the case due to lack of merit, which basically means the tenant or the plaintiff did not have merit to continue the case. So there was no hearing, there was no you're guilty or you're not guilty. It's just it didn't get that far. And the big reasons for that were, if I have this on here. So the big reasons for that were being a landlord out of possession. So I had no prior notice of this vicious dog at the property, all of that which can change things. Nor was I the manager that was dealing with this property. So there is a degree of liability that you actually have to have for you to be liable. So here, I wasn't managing the building, number one. Number two, we had no prior notice. So even if I had known this dog is there, but there had been no prior notice of him being vicious, so what? How was I to know that this afternoon he's going to go and try to forcibly detach the neighbor's son's foot from his leg? Like, that's not something a normal dog does, right? So how was I to know? So those were some pretty key things that were in my favor. And I'll just add this as a warning. If you do get notices, or if you do get complaints about work needing done, and you don't do it, and there's an incident, everything changes. So in all these cases, that did not apply, and all of which were very favorable for me. By the way, I kept this attorney's number just in case I need it again. We also switched our coverage to a more landlord-friendly insurance carrier, which I took it as a good lesson, and I don't consider the $13,000 really wasted, because it was a good lesson for me in a couple of different ways. So yeah. And then also, in addition to all that, I have had 3 more letters of intent to sue, which were all liability. Those 3 were of the same kind of like shade, if you will. Maybe not quite as much damage, but those I forwarded to my insurance agent, who then took a look at it and basically told the plaintiff's attorney that they're not going to get anywhere, which the plaintiff's attorney, after doing a little bit of due diligence, figured that out as well and never actually sued. So all of which changes. One was there's a couple of different things, but all of which changes if there's a complaint of work not getting done and somebody hurts themselves because of it, or if there's a notice that you just kind of ignore, or some other violation, none of which apply to any of our cases. So for some reason, I consider liability insurance to be a very good value, and we'll probably continue to carry it. So that's about all I have.
I wonder if you could have collected that $13,000 from the property manager insurance.
She and I are good friends. We didn't feel like finding out.
Question.
Oh yeah, and then here's a couple of contacts that I have So State Farm does a lot of my single family and 2 units, and then BCF Group does a lot of our multi-units. They're an independent agency. And then John Hess does a lot of our flips and larger multis. So you had a question there?
Right here. How do you have your property structured? All in one LLC, multiple LLCs?
So the question is, how are my properties structured? So there are multiple LLCs. Most of my rental properties are in one LLC.
Individual LLCs?
One large.
One large one.
One LLC with the majority of my rental properties. Yes.
With 5, you had 5 intents to sue. How many properties, how many doors over how many years to get 5 incidents?
So we have a little bit more than 100 properties, about 180 doors or so, and that's since 2010. The first incident actually happened in 2016, so I went 6 years without, any incidents whatsoever. I also think it's, I have a larger amount of properties that I buy need work, and a lot of them had tenants that weren't, the best tenants. And in each case, the people that, did that they were kind of losers at life in general. It's just how they rolled through life. And here was their chance, to really make it big. They had that chance every morning. They just decided this is the better way to make that happen.
Thank you, Eli. Okay, a few more here. We're going to get Dave Wolf up here again to talk about some of his stuff and his approach to insurance.
So I really do not like insurance at all. I don't like it, so I try to avoid it at all costs. So what I do is I take the highest deductible, and I found out that you could, a lot of times you think 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, but I actually found that I can do a percentage. So my percentage is like, I don't know what it is, but it's over 5%. So it's a percentage of the total, I think it's a percentage of the total amount that I have covered. So I have a very high deductible, which keeps the premiums as low as possible. I do try to handle things, I try to handle things myself. I rarely try to call the insurance company, because if I do, I guess they're going to increase my insurance, right? So one interesting takeaway, I had a pipe freeze on Christmas Eve also, and I guess this is why insurance on vacant properties is more expensive, because I had a pipe freeze. There was a tenant in the house. Luckily, my property manager picked up the phone. I think it was 11 o'clock at night, and picked up the phone. We had someone over there and shut off the main within 45 minutes. So this was I believe it's 11 unit in York, and water was pouring very quickly. And could have been a disaster. I guess, that's a difference between having tenants. A vacant property is never good. Like, if you have a vacant property, it's never good. A tenant in the property could actually be better from how I can see it, because if there's something going on, they're going to call you. If it's vacant, no one's going to call you. You can fill up the basement. So I try to not do too many claims at all. I try to take the highest. I wish I didn't have to do insurance at all. I wish I could self-insure. I tried to research that, and I didn't get anywhere. So I don't know if it's possible. I don't know if it's possible or not. But when you get a mortgage, it's required. Insurance is a great business to be in because it's required. Crazy. It should be optional. But I'm not in charge, so it is. If you're getting a mortgage, it is required. So what a good business to be in, because people are required to get insurance. Also, if you're in a flood zone and you have a mortgage, if you don't have a mortgage, you don't have to get flood insurance. If you don't have a mortgage, you don't have to get insurance either. I don't know if you followed me there. But if you're in a flood zone and you're getting a mortgage, you have to get flood insurance. You have to. Even if a corner of your house is in a flood zone and they've never gotten floods. And you have to have enough flood insurance or enough coverage to cover your mortgage. So anyway, it's required. Great business to be in. Great business to be in because people are required to get it. But okay, so I had one claim, and I thought I was going to make a lot of money. I'd go on the hunting trips, and So here's the situation. I bought this house for $17,000. Now you're probably wondering, how did that happen? It doesn't normally happen recently, but I bought it for $17,000 at a sheriff's sale, and I was all into this house when I was finished at $44,000. It's kind of ironic, but it was on Cinder Street in Birdsboro. Cinder Street, not good. Side note, if you're ever buying a house that's in, the street name has water in it, you're going to get water in your basement. Like Spring Valley, Springton, you're going to get water in the basement, right? Swamp Bridge Road. Just a side note. And they're probably going to charge you more for your insurance too. Anyway, so this was on Cinder Road in Birdsboro. I had a $144,000 coverage. I only put into this thing $44,000. So I'm thinking this was a pretty bad fire. So it was a fire it was attached, but it was at a fire. The other house was completely totaled, and mine was half totaled. That's probably the wrong verbiage. That's a car, but. So it was a pretty bad fire. It was on Easter. It was not great. It was pretty bad. No one could live there. And then the firefighters came in there and then completely took it over the edge with bashing in the doors and the windows. I know they had to do that, but the water damage everywhere. So I said to the insurance company, "I'll take $144,000." They didn't do that. I was like, I heard stories about people doing this, but like, I'll just take the $144,000. I don't want this. I just want the $144,000. I didn't get anywhere with that. So the end is, I ended up, I had to fix it up. I think it was $40,000 to fix it up. They covered the full $40,000. But I did learn something in there. So since you guys are here to learn, there's an interesting thing that happens when you have a fire. They couldn't get a hold of us immediately because it was Easter. So they got a hold of us that day, but they called a restoration company, and the restoration company came and boarded up the whole house. And they wanted me to work with the restoration company, and I don't like to go down the normal path of things. So I was like, no, I don't want to work with them. They're telling me I need to work with them. I don't want to work with them. I don't understand this. I have to understand it. So I ended up not working with them, but I think a restoration company might, in some situations, work. But if there's one thing that you can learn here tonight, when you hire a restoration company, your contract with the restoration company is different than the contract that you have with the insurance company. So I've seen it before where a restoration company comes in, they do all this work, it costs $100,000, and they say, I'm going to work with the insurance company, I'm going to work with the insurance company. But they only end up covering $50,000. You're on the hook for the other $50,000. So I'm in the mortgage business, and sometimes I see liens against houses from restoration companies because the homeowner didn't pay that difference. So if you can take anything away, if you ever have restoration companies are called by the fire department to board up the house, and you really want to understand, call your agent, get information. You need to understand what's going on, because if you don't understand it, it's not going to work out it's not going to work out well. But in the end, they covered 6 months or 5 months, however long, of my tenant rent. They covered the rent, they covered everything. So I didn't get the $144,000 and make a lot of money, but it was a very fair exchange. So the other interesting part about that was I think it was about $40,000, but I paid my premiums a year in advance, and my premiums were $40,000. So I basically gave them $40,000, then they gave me back $40,000. So, I mean, it still worked. It just told me, again, hey, wouldn't it be nice? You know, if I pay $60,000 per year, I could put that in an account, make money off of it, self-insure at some point. But so that's my story. When is it required? The other thing is, I was just thinking through this. I've always noticed that the Amish insurance or the church insurance was always so much cheaper. I was like, that's pretty cool. Why, you know, wouldn't it be cool if we started a co-op or some sort of co-op where I just think there's so much fluff, and even hearing some of these stories, there's so much fluff in these insurance companies. I have State Farm, so I decided to Google how much the CEO makes. Well, he makes $20 million. Well, where does that $20 million come from? Me. It comes from me. So then I decided, well, those commercials are really cool. You guys ever watch this, you know, the commercials? I'm like, those commercials, that little jingle, I don't even know what it is right now, but so I Googled how much they spend on advertising, and the number was so big, I couldn't even remember what it was, but I think it was $2 billion. Or something like that. It was a huge, huge number. But who pays for all that? Who pays for all that? So, yeah, it's so like, why can't we all put our money together and come up with a co-op? This is just a dream. This isn't going to happen probably, but anyway, I've seen where well, I think it's the old order of Amish insurance. It ended up being like $200 a month or $200 a year. And I'm like, wow, what they're doing is they're cutting out the insurance, they're cutting out president's pay, CEO pay, they're cutting out, and they're still having real insurance. If something happens, it gets done. I don't know a whole lot about you know, the insurance world, but I thought, wow, what a cool idea. Maybe someday I'll put that together. But you guys sign up for it? If we all do it, you're in.
Yep.
You're in.
Will the mortgage company accept it?
Well, you'd have to, yeah, you'd have to make it official, right? I don't know anything about it. I put it into Google, and it took me to insurance companies. So they all wanted me to. They all wanted me to buy. They all wanted me to buy insurance.
Even Google did.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. Because if you ever, I decided. This is a little bit of a sidebar. I'm almost done, but I decided to do some advertising on Google. And boy, that is not a good idea. Yeah, they like suck the money right out of you. You know, you the more you pay, the higher you get up on Google. So anyway, they thought I was looking to buy insurance. So they probably know that, and they're going to be sending me all kinds of things. So there was one last insurance story that I'm going to tell you, and it's tied to an Airbnb, so I thought that'd be pretty cool. I do not know. This is one that I heard of, and so I don't know the details. But somebody fell going down the steps, and I don't know all the details. But once they paid it, there was an actual claim. I guess the steps were pretty steep, but this was a very large Airbnb where big groups came, and after that, they could not get insurance, and now they can no longer rent it out. So they just can't. They can't get anybody to write the claim after something something happens. So yeah, I don't understand that part of insurance, why they have to increase it after you have a claim. But I guess it is what it is. They're giving you insurance. You got to play by the rules. But does anybody have any questions about how I look at insurance or anything? It's exciting. Yeah.
Call me when you start your car.
You're in?
Yeah.
You're in?
Me too.
So the coolest part about insurance that see, the insurance companies, they get to collect the money up front, and then they take forever to pay the claims. It's a great business model, if you're an insurance company. So you collect $1 million, and then you make money off the million, right? You invest it into, there's money markets right now paying 4%. So, like, if I was to collect $1 million from all you guys, and then I can make 4% off that, and then you have a claim, and then I say, well, are you sure you want to do that? Because your insurance is going to go up. And then you say, no, I don't want to do it. So then I'm like, okay, I just keep making money off this million. It's a great business model from the insurance side of things, but I don't know where I was going with that. Yeah. Go ahead, Neil.
Do you ever get title insurance?
So title insurance, I hated title insurance for years and years, and I used to complain about title insurance. You can't even explain what it is. It's that bad. So, like, I never knew what I was paying for. It was horrible. And then you would go to the title guy, tell me about a claim, and then it'd be like, well, I remember when 30 years ago. And I was like, oh yeah, 30 years ago, so I'm paying $1,500 for this. So instead of complaining, I joined them and I started a title company. So that, when there's something, there's a win there, right? Just join them. The amount I own a title company, and the amount of claims in 10 years of owning this title company and doing well over 100 transactions a month is maybe 1 or 2 claims, and then the total claims were very, very small. So, but it's required, so you have to get it. So not only is it required, the fee on title insurance is state regulated. The lobbyists for insurance companies must be very, very strong, because the fee on title insurance is state regulated. You cannot shop it around. It's crazy.
Why you started a company, right?
Blockchain can't change it.
How about a big hand for Dave? Thanks, Dave. Got one more for you here. And then I have a couple closing comments on that. So I had my first claim last year, and rather than trying to describe it to you, I will just show you a picture. It's a little fuzzy because it was in the middle of the night, and I think I might have taken through a window, but that is exactly what it looks like. It is a car on the front porch of a property that I own in New Holland. It's just down the road from Musselman Lumber. Some of you guys have probably seen it. Probably wondered why this guy doesn't fix his roof for a while. So I did not take that picture. I got it from a tenant across the street the next morning when I woke up. Thankfully nobody was hurt. I went over the next day, it looked like that. They had put some props in to what they thought was stabilize the roof. And so I contacted Ryan. We started that, going down that path. About noon I get a call from my second floor tenants. And they said, hey, this roof just collapsed. And I said, well, that's interesting. It's a little scary, but I'd rather have it on the ground anyway. So I went over and realized actually only half of it collapsed. So I took my Sawzall and I made the other side collapse as well. Because I was more comfortable with it being on the ground than hanging there. So I put some tie-back, secured the spot where it tore off the house. We got the insurance stuff rolling, and a couple of weeks later, I get another text message from my tenant across the street, and she said there was another accident at the intersection, and this picture looked like that. So now I have a car on my porch roof. All right, this is it. It's just like this needs to change. Thankfully, in both of the instances, 2 car accidents, nobody was hurt. But the first one especially, that's scary. Like oops, going the wrong way. So the car would have came right across here, and my first floor tenant is sleeping in this bedroom with his head against that wall. That would make me uncomfortable. But luckily nobody was hurt. Filed the claim. Actually, the interesting thing about this one is we found out pretty quickly that I don't know if you remember any of these details, Ryan, but found out that the driver of the car that was at fault only had like a max coverage limit of like 5,000, which is, I guess, pretty typical.
State minimum. Yep.
So if I would have went with that, the 5,000 would have got prorated between their car, the other car, and my porch, which wasn't going to leave a whole lot. So I submitted it to my insurance company through Ryan, and I mean, it's a pain. I mean, the insurance company did everything to make it as easy as they could, but it's really, literally a pain. We got the mess cleaned up, and then I had Ike Wilder's. Ike in the room here? Ike Wilder, he comes here sometimes. He might be in Florida. So he's the one that ended up cleaning it up for me, and got me a quote of $17,000 to replace the porch and actually the entire front shutters and siding. Windows were okay, but we replaced shutters, siding, and the entire front porch. So $17,000 later, we were back up and running, minus my $2,500 deductible. The way this worked here is I submitted the quote, they approved it, I got a partial payout, we completed the work, and then they paid out the rest. And then only a couple of months after that, just recently, I don't know if I even told you this, Ryan, Philadelphia Contribution Ship was the carrier. They contacted me, and they had another payment for me for $2,500 for the deductible. So they would have went after the insurance company of the driver, I guess. So I got all the money. I wasn't out any money, and I got a new front porch, siding, shutters, and it was a pain. So that was my first claim. But boy, when that second accident happened, 3 weeks after the first one, I'm like, this is going to have to stop. But so I think what I'm going to do is get a no parking sign made. And it would say no parking anytime. Anyway, we're going to wrap it up here. I don't think Ryan had his contact info, so I'm going to throw that up there for you if you want to contact Ryan. Another little interesting thing here. So as you probably caught as we're going through this, a lot of what insurance is, it's just spreading out risk. Like Dave said, you have to get it if you're getting a mortgage. If you're not getting a mortgage, you don't have to. I would probably still recommend liability insurance, but actually fire insurance, you don't have to. You just have to know what risk you're willing to take. I mean, think of something much smaller. Like you can get insurance on your cell phone. A lot of people have insurance on their phones. And I think it's just stupid because, again, they're making a lot of money on the insurance. It's a risk that I am willing to take. So I'm not going to buy insurance on a cell phone or on something that I can easily afford to take that loss. I got an even more extreme example for you than insurance on a cell phone. A while back, I went to an auto parts store to buy some turn signal bulbs for my vehicle, and I bought 2 so that when one goes out, I have a spare. And he's ringing me up, and he said, "Would you like to buy an extended warranty?" And I mean, the bill was like $10. And I was trying to figure out if I heard him correctly, and then I'm trying to figure out how to keep a straight face. And I said, I think I'll pass, but how much would it be? And it was like $1.78 or something. I could have got an extended warranty on these turning signal bulbs.
Wow.
Yeah. And then if my bulb would have went out, so probably it was extending it from maybe a year to 3 years or something. I mean, it's the most ridiculous extended warranty I ever heard of, but that's what he was offering me. But and it was probably just something that shows up in the system. It was an automated thing. It popped up, so he asked me. But I thought it was actually really fun. So I believe that is it. We are a little bit after our target time here, but that didn't hold out too bad. Glad you touched on short-term rentals, Dave. I actually was going to get on that topic. I didn't really have anything to share on that, but I think it's something to be aware of. There are some carriers out there. Proper Insurance, I think, is one that does a lot of them. They tend to be really expensive. I personally had one that I have insured with Ryan that the one carrier dropped us, I think, because they just stopped doing short-term rentals and the premium like tripled. So it's a thing. The short-term rentals are going to be a little bit of a different animal when it comes to the insurance. Ryan, do you have any closing comments based on the whole conversation or anything, or would you rather just interact with folks later?
You should have called me for the light bulb, because I probably would have got you covered for $1.
All right, we're going to wrap it up for tonight. I'm sure these guys will be sticking around. Ryan, did you bring some business cards along?
I left my wallet in my truck, which is in the parking lot, so if you see a black Dodge Ram, please don't break into it, because my life is in there.
Well, you got it, Ryan.
Feel free to shoot me an email or a text. My personal cell's on there.
Awesome.
So.